Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year to those who I've not seen yet in the virtual world, but certainly for the group around the table here in person. I'm Tracy McKibben. I'm the chair of the Finance and Risk Committee of the Authority in the New York State Canal Corporation. I'd like to welcome my committee members, John Kamal, Dennis Trainer, Betheda Gonzalez, Michael Balboni. Anthony Pacenti has been excused from the meeting today. Welcome everyone to the NYPA and Canal Corporation. Welcome also to the staff around the table and also participating virtually. This meeting has been duly noticed as required by the open meeting law, and I call the meeting to order. Everyone's had a chance to review the agenda for today. If there are there any questions or concerns about the agenda? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
I think I heard a second in there. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The agenda is adopted. The next portion of the meeting will be held in executive session. I'll ask for a motion to conduct an executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of a particular corporation pursuant to Section 105 of the Public Officers Law.
So moved.
I think I heard a second in there as well. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. I'll ask for a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. No votes were taken during our executive session. All the committee members have had a chance to review and have been polled prior to the meeting regarding the conflicts and have submitted all potential conflicts to the corporate secretary for inclusion in the minutes. We'll jump right into our discussion agenda. I'll invite Adam Barsky, EVP and Chief Financial Officer, to present his report today.
Thank you, Chairperson McKibben. Just to give an update on the year-end numbers as we see them today, this is only through the 12th period. We still have a 13th period close. After that, we're also going through the annual audit. So these are unaudited. Could always change slightly depending on that process. You want to put the financial slides up? There we go. So if you recall, the last time we met and I provided some guidance, we said that the range would be between 112 and 135 with at that time a 118 expected. We're sort of at that higher end of that range at 130 versus the 135, but within that range and still significantly over our targets for the year. And those are driven by higher energy prices flowing through our merchant portfolio, which is somewhat offset by additional expenses in the monetized funds, additional revenues from our transmission assets than previously budgeted, and lower expenses in certain areas as well. So overall, it was a strong year helped by those higher energy prices, which, I would just caution in terms of where we see markets today. Those are not sustainable energy prices. Those are somewhat of an anomaly of the confluence of events of last year and are normalizing more towards some historical norms as we get into the new year, which as many of you know, have been warmer weather than normal, which has had an impact on energy prices as we start the new year, as well. It has a rippling effect. But just trying to give some guidance, sort of, how do you build off of this, or where do we see things going in towards the beginning of 23? But 22 looks as it is now a very good year for NYPA in terms of achieving our goals.
Adam, as you look at this, again, this is year-end results, as you're looking out over the rest of the year, and we see the benefits to our merchant business has had to our results. Is that where is most at risk? I'll use that word in terms of where we've been lifted, and it's counter or inversely related to our hedging positions, right?
Yes.
And so there's likely going to be a lot more volatility in that business going forward.
Sure, there will be continued volatility there, and watching energy prices as well as our water flows. Those are significant variables that we need to keep our eye on. The transmission revenues will, I think, continue to be strong. But as you mentioned, I don't think we will see the benefit that we saw this year. And if you recall, if you look at those numbers, we went into the year with a $266 million target. We ended at 371. As I mentioned, that you have to sort of take that and net out 60 million of additional monetized funds that are additional expenses. So there's sort of that net margin benefit, and then the additional transmission revenues. For this year, as we went into the year, we had a snapshot date in September, and the portfolio at that time looked at 329 million for the year. That number as of the other day is looking around the 278 million. So it's a little bit off of that target. That could, come back somewhat, but that's where we see things today. And we'll, as you know, this year's plan is 95 million compared to, this end of year result at 130 against the 61. So the plan came in lower because we were expecting those prices to start to come down and levelize, but it's come down, even further than was originally anticipated. But we'll keep an eye on that as well as everything else and manage our way through it. And then, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the other major variable for us is going to be where the state pension funds ends up at the year. Their year end at March 31st, depending on how well that goes, that could have an impact on us later on in the year from an expense standpoint on an accrual basis, not necessarily cash.
And the more than doubling of our expenses, sort of other expenses for the year, that's largely attributed to, can you just remind the committee again?
There were a number of different expenses, as you mentioned. Those monetized funds were ahead of where the target was.
And what's the percentage of that makes up the additional?
That makes up almost half of it.
Half of it. Okay.
There's another half that were other expenses, and some of those things were emergent projects that came up during the year that were not previously anticipated. There were some provisions for potential uncollectibles, as well as there were some marking down of some inventory that was considered obsolete. So there were a number of items that contributed to that, but overall the expenses did come in from the operating site standpoint. The O&M came in lower than budget by $32 million.
Yeah, no, I was talking about
Yeah,
more.
so
the
these
other
are more
expenses.
sort of extraneous things that are not necessarily the operations at the site. So when it comes to the actual operating assets, we managed our expenses there lower than the plan.
Great. Any other questions from the committee on our year-end results? Great. Thank you, Adam.
Yep, sure. You're welcome.
No votes are necessary. I'll now invite Thomas Spencer, Senior Director, Enterprise and Operational Risk, to present his report. Great, thank you.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Chairman Gibbon. Today's presentation, I will briefly go over the key accomplishments for 2022 and the major objectives of 2023 for the risk management and resiliency team. Certainly, there's a lot more accomplishments and goals that I have listed on the page, but what I tried to do was boil it down to those that I thought were most impactful for today's discussion. So if we could flip to the next slide, that would be great. So focusing our attention to the left side of the presentation on our 2022 accomplishments. I'll start off with the resiliency team. They completed the Argonne Climate Resiliency and Adaptation Study. This study used scenario analysis to look at multiple climate hazards spanning the 25 to 30 year span time horizon and the potential impacts on NYPA assets. At a high level, those factors impacting NYPA assets were the potential increase in rising water levels at Sini, and also the potential for operational changes based on a shift in the shoulder months due to warming temperatures. The enterprise and operational risk team finalized the NYPA risk appetite statement, including Canals, and they completed the annual enterprise risk assessment process, updating our risk profiles in consideration of a risk appetite for the first time. In addition, we conducted a year-over-year maturity assessment using a scale from 0 to 5, and we increased our maturity score from 2.4 to 3.2 at the end of 2022, and are achieving our goal that we set for ourselves of 3.0. The market and commodities team helped to dampen the impacts of market volatility by working with the business units to assist in the execution of commodity hedging strategies for both power and aluminum, while ensuring that those transactions only took place with highly rated credit counterparties. And then on the corporate insurance side, we continue to further refine our retention levels and policy limits through the annual renewal process, and then also establish the formation of a capital insurance company. Switching to the right hand of the slide on our 2023 goals. For resilience, we will finalize and implement a resiliency framework across business continuity planning, crisis management, and IT disaster recovery that will ensure greater collaboration and leverage the synergies between the teams. Additionally, we will continue to develop our emerging risk program, and we'll be coming back to the committee with an update to our emerging risk in May of this year. On the enterprise and operational team side, we will update the NYPA and Canals risk profiles through the annual enterprise and operational risk assessment process, ensuring alignment with our risk appetite. And we will also performing another risk management maturity assessment to show year-over-year growth in the risk management maturity. And we'll be coming back to the board to report on the results of both of those efforts in Q2 and Q3. The market and commodities teams will continue to expand and mature the credit risk function, and also work with the business units on identifying, developing, and executing on different market opportunities and hedges. And finally, on the corporate insurance side, we'll begin the utilization of the captive insurance company. And under the initial phase of the captive, we'll be underwriting both the property deductible and terrorism insurance. Additionally, the insurance team will be reviewing the owner-controlled insurance program and looking at both the strategy and structure of the program before its renewal in June of this year. And we'll be coming back to the board to discuss the results of those activities also. Overall, I think the risk management and maturity teams of the risk management and resiliency teams are well positioned for future success. And we're looking forward to coming back to the board during 2022 to report on the results of our efforts and activities. Sorry.
No, sorry, were you finished?
Yeah, I was just going to say I was going to pause for any comments or questions.
Yeah, just a comment starting out and then a couple of questions. I am pleased, I mean, you're holding things steady as we continue to mature this part of the NYPA's team. The move from business continuation to operational resilience, I was very pleased to see that, because that's where I understand the direction is going, because it's a more holistic view of how we look at how we operate and continue to operate in a safe and risk manage environment. So I was very pleased to see that being part of 2023. I guess the question I also have is, how do you feel about, as you're going to come back to us in May, and the world seems to be becoming increasingly more riskier, and the change in the types of risk. And are you comfortable that we are moving quickly enough to evaluate what the environment is for us today, as opposed to what it was even last year or 6 months ago? That you feel comfortable that the team is able to put this together and ultimately come, present to the board and the committee what we see as the risk applicable to our business going forward.
Yeah, I'm very confident. And part of the reason is, I've had this conversation with many of the folks on my team in other areas. From a risk management perspective, I think we spent probably the last 2 or 3 years kind of just collecting data, collecting information. And I really feel like this year we're right there where we can start like taking that information, analyzing it and taking good insights and spend more time on data analysis as opposed to data collection. And, the team's matured. We've got, we've put a lot of good policies and procedures in place, got a really solid team under us. And, I can say since I've been here, this is probably like the best team as far as just working together and sharing information, and not just within the risk management resiliency team, but across the whole organization. So in answer to your question, I feel pretty confident, like this is gonna be a really good year for us.
Because ultimately it needs to be to the benefit of the organization, right? And so making sure that you're helping to mature the organization from a risk management standpoint.
And I think I would just add, we spend a lot of time looking at and refining our risk metrics, and we're also paying close attention to emerging risks and capturing all that data, as Tom said. And so I think we're well positioned to continue to report to you on how we see the risk horizon for the Power Authority.
Yes.
Any other questions from committee members? No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And no votes are necessary. This is just a report and update. I'll now invite John Canale, VP Strategic Supply Management, to present his report.
Thank you, Trustee McGibbon. Good morning, all. My name is John Canale, Vice President of Strategic Supply Management. Next slide, please. So in 2022, SSM continued its focus on providing an agile and flexible approach to our procurements in support of Vision 2030. We focused our efforts on growing our supply chain with greater participation from diverse firms while managing supply chain risks. Our 2022 accomplishments include 24 supplier diversity outreach events, doubling the target of 12. This included an annual MWBE forum held in Albany, where NYPA participated in 2 panels and was the recipient of the MWBE Champions Award. We expanded our outreach efforts and onboarded nearly 700 new suppliers in our digital sourcing platform of Ariba. To meet the procurement demands resulting from Vision 2030, we issued over 600 RFPs. This included RFPs to support Connect All, Smart Path Connect, Next Generation Niagara, Captive Insurance, and Canals Excursions program, to name just a few. We worked with NYPA's cyber team to qualify an additional 22 BES suppliers to ensure compliance with our NERC CIP 13 requirements. To date, that gives us nearly 100 suppliers that have been pre-qualified in this area. In order to comply with Governor Hochul's Executive Order 16, we collected nearly 1,000 certifications regarding suppliers' presence in Russia prior to issuing any new purchase orders or change orders. We also launched new supplier diversity programs such as the Mentor Protege and Surety Bond Training, with participation of over 120 diverse businesses statewide. And finally, in 22, we had over $172 million in diverse spend among MWBEs, SDVOBs, and New York State small businesses. As we look to 2023, this will mark the 40-year anniversary of our supplier diversity program here at NYPA. And to date, we've spent over $1.7 billion with diverse suppliers. We continue to develop our MWB, SDVOB, and small and local businesses through our supplier diversity programs aimed at building capacity and competencies. On January 10th, we held Grow Your Business in Career event at the Northland Workforce Training Center in East Buffalo with Empire State Development Corporation, LIS, and other agencies. And it was a great event and received very good feedback. We are planning our annual Supplier Diversity Expo in White Plains on March 1, where we expect over 300 attendees. And we continue to evaluate opportunities to establish long-term contracts with domestic suppliers to improve logistics and transportation, mitigating geopolitical threats, and other supply chain issues. We're also looking to launch procurement strategies for a transmission program in partnership with business development and project management teams. And in support of New York State's Executive Order 22, we are going to integrate sustainability requirements in procurement sourcing events. Furthermore, we're looking to integrate supplier sustainability criteria as part of our RFP evaluation process. Finally, in 23, from a digitization and process improvement standpoint, we are looking to automate our procurement award process when it comes to the generation of award, FRC, and board approval documents. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I guess one question and this, congratulations. And when I look at the number that you have here, 172 million, I'm always like, is that good or bad? I don't know how to tell if I compare it to prior year, right? And are you continuing to be ambitious in what you want to accomplish for the next year?
Mhm.
So relative to previous years, how does this fall? Is this a growth? Is it
Yeah, so
status quo? Is it?
if you carve up the 172 million, you'll see that, you know, we achieved our 22% goal for MWBE spend, which amounted to about 90 million of that 172. We also had a SDVOB success at 5.4%, nearly hitting the 6% mark that we were committed to. But I think where you're seeing the biggest growth is in our efforts to enhance and improve our small business program, because we recognize that we have certain limitations when it comes to the type of work that we do and our ability to hit certain MWB goals just due to the unique nature of the work we do. So what we decided to do in 22 is begin a small business program, because the small businesses are actually the pipeline into MWB and SDVOB certification. So if we can keep small businesses, you know, alive and thriving regionally and locally in and around our power plants, we think that's a really good strategy to have. And so with that, we had about $75 million in spend for New York State small businesses defined as 300 employees or less. What that means is that we've seen a growth in our diverse spend of about 20 to 30% year over year.
Okay.
And we're looking to do that again in 23.
So I think it's good. It will be helpful to lay that out for us so that we can compare and see that we're growing and the numbers
Sure.
are increasing. We're doing the spend ultimately because we want more diverse participants in the bids that we
Exactly.
that
Yes.
we launch.
Mhm.
So if you going forward in the slides, if you could show us a comparison, this is where
trend
we
from
this
year
is
to year?
where- exactly.
Okay,
So
sure.
so that we can see the progress that's being made, and then
Great suggestion.
the-
Absolutely.
Any other questions from the committee? Great, thank
Thank you.
you. No votes are necessary here. I'll now invite Andy Boulais, VP Project and Construction Management, to present the next item.
Thank you and good morning. I have one item to present today on behalf of operations. It's a set of on-call contracts in support of substation construction and maintenance work. Next slide, please. Today, we're asking that the Finance and Risk Committee recommend the approval of 4 10-year construction contracts in the aggregate amount of $150 million. To Michael's Power of Neenah, Wisconsin, Kiewit Power Constructors of Omaha, Nebraska, Hinkles and McCoy of Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, MJ Electric of Houston, Texas, to the Board of Trustees at their February meeting. The authority's long-term asset management strategy has identified construction-related work that needs to be accomplished in the next 10 years in support of Vision 2030. These contract services will include but not limited to site work, foundations, civil and electrical work, installation and commissioning of substation equipment. They will allow the authority to react quicker to planned and emergent work that we have identified and can be leveraged to address emerging physical security risks identified at our substations. In December of 2021, a request for proposal went out, with 10 proposals being received in February of 2022. The list was then narrowed down to 5 providers because of their technical and organizational capabilities, their capacity, and their experience. Several post-bid addendums were issued to provide clarification, to set site walkdowns, and to extend the bids. Following an extensive evaluation process based on the criteria on the slide, the evaluation committee recommends the award of contracts to Michaels Power, Kiewit Power Constructors, Hinkles McCoy, MJ Electric for an aggregate amount of $150 million for a term of 10 years. With that, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, just a couple of questions that I had. I noticed that there's no New York State participant, and I assume that we did efforts, and there's another contract that we're going to talk about, the extraordinary efforts we go through when we don't see the kind of response that we want. Do we do that similarly when we have a bid like this of this size, where we don't have a New York participant, where
We did have some New York participants. Matter of fact, one made it to the final 5.
okay.
However, due to safety and performance concerns, the evaluation committee opted not to select them.
And then obviously this started before the recent incidents that we've heard with regard to substations, right?
Yes.
And so does this help us address that as well? Since again, this was before that even started. So are we comfortable that we've got the right response and these participants to address that as a concern going forward, the kinds of problems that have arisen over the last
Very
month,
good,
2
very
months?
good question. Some of the scope that you see for Smart Path Connect includes such things as physical barriers, security systems, cameras, so on and so forth, in support of those substations. And the same holds true with this value contract suite. These people are capable of executing that work.
Okay. And that's part of the contract that
Correct.
they would address that as a concern that we now know is
Correct.
real in life. Okay. And how does this compare to the contract that's expiring? Sorry, was there a question from the committee? And how does this compare to the contract that's expiring? Are these same participants as before? Obviously, there was a contract before this one. Right?
There was
And so
not.
There was not.
that
This
I'm
is a
aware of,
new
John.
contract. We didn't
I don't
have this.
recall.
This is a new-
Okay.
new suite of contracts to
Ah.
handle the substation.
Great. Okay. All right.
I didn't hear that answer. What was that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, it's included as part of the work, so we should be in good shape.
It's a new contract.
New
This is
contract
new
value.
work that had not been done previously. So, and Adam, you were saying the
Yeah, sorry.
agility has come from
Yeah, not that
this.
it's not totally designed scope of work, so it's on call, so it allows the flexibility of the team and contractors to react quickly for any emerging issues that may arise and plan for things. So it gives us a lot more ability to respond to things that come up as they do.
If you look at what we've traditionally done in the past, we've issued contracts based on limited scope, a particular project or a particular program. In this scenario, we've used some baseline projects as indicative scope that we would execute under these value contracts. And again, it creates the flexibility for us to be able to react a lot quicker to planned work as well as emerging work. And we've identified a number of areas, a number of project programs over the course of the next 10 years that will be tapping into these value contracts.
And Trish, you were gonna add?
Yeah, I think Andy's right on, right? It's just more of a change in approach to us, right? Just being more flexible, right? You've seen TLM contracts, you've seen them come before the board and sort of one-offs and, right, the challenges around how long it takes us to award contracts, negotiating T's and C's every time. So this was a good approach to the team to go out, really solidify what's needed from, every requirement that we have, right? Get good baselines. These are good vendors in the industry. And I think just like we do with these major long-term on-call contracts, continue to look at the market, always do market scans. We know there's new participants coming in. So 10 years is a long time. We've talked about that before in this room, but being mindful that there will be other players that come in. So Andy did mention a firm, right, that had some safety and performance concerns, but right, continuing to work with vendors too, to introduce more to the pool. So not ignorant to that too, that 10 years is a long time for only 4 vendors, but recognizing the importance and that we have to move quicker maybe than we've had to in the past.
And Tracy, I also assume, given the length of the contract, that there are periodic reviews of the company's financial health and their staffing, and that we do an update to make sure that they're still in the same position that they are in, say, 5 years that they are today in terms of their capabilities.
Correct, right? I would say from a financial perspective, performance, from a safety perspective, right? We've really, I would say, step up in the way we've built the supplier relationship programs with SSM to really do more of that monitoring, if you will, right? More from a financial perspective, but also from just performance safety wise, right? How they're doing with their diverse spend, right? We've stepped up the monitoring programs with SSM over the last couple of years. So financial reviews will definitely be part of it on top of a number of other performance criteria.
Thank you.
Safety being a primary one that
Safety,
excluded.
right? Absolutely,
a
right?
New York
Ongoing
participant.
safety, environmental, right? Excellence in their own programs and where they're executing on our property, or just, right, generally their own corporate culture around safety and environmental.
Great. Very
And
important.
how does the 15 million a year, Trish, compare to what we traditionally have spent on a one-off basis?
Right. So what Andy mentioned, we did look at the pipeline within 10 years. Again, what we know now, based on our own asset management strategies, what we understand might be coming forward from, from business development perspective. So I think that is right in line with where we've been, right? Whether it be TLAM or other emergent projects or other just investments in transmission. So I'd say that's pretty consistent with where we've been over the last couple of years. And again, part of that review will be to see if projects have to come in, move out, right? Always an ongoing review of that authorization and that spend.
And again, no one's on retainer here. This just gives you latitude to work within these parameters with these providers. Got it.
Right,
Okay.
like normal, we would go out with a mini bid, right? Once an actual project is identified, a specific scope, we would actually go out, right, competitively among these firms to, right, there will be competition within those firms. So we would mini bid, right? That's the term that we use.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there is action required of the committee on this. So I'll ask for a motion to recommend this item to the full board.
So moved.
I think I heard a second in there. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We now have on the agenda the consent agenda. The consent agenda is before the full committee. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the consent agenda if there are no questions
So moved.
or concerns.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. The date of the next Joint Finance and Risk Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on March 16th, 2023. I'll ask for a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and seconded in there. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Team.